Hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market and option recap for April 10th. So we've got the S&P in front of us. We had some nice performance in the averages, no major volatility at the end of the day like we saw yesterday. We finished up, SPY finished up 1.6%, just a little bit higher than where we opened, but still, I would say baby steps for now and a move in the right direction. The Qs actually had some nice outperformance today, and so did IWM was up 1.9% as well. So while the S&P really, if you kind of look at where we started the day, didn't move that much other than a couple times around, what was this, 11 o'clock, and then around 3 o'clock as well. There were some other things that outperformed, so it kind of did feel a little bit different where there was some nice sector outperformance. So I was talking about how this weekend, that the previous week was basically not so much a stock pickers market. Today felt a little bit more like at least a sector performance market, and I'll get into those sectors that performed well. One of the things that I wanted to just talk about quickly before I change charts was it does look like there is still some decent, there's a decent seller out there, and I don't think you really have to kind of jump to conclusions with this, but every time we started to go a little bit higher for the day, you could see that we just got knocked down. So this kind of thing is not natural to me, unless you do have that big seller that's present. Right around, this was 11:30, looked like we are actually going to turn and catch some momentum, and then boom, a couple big red bars, and you could see the volume, or you could see it in different places, but this is S&P futures. We got knocked all the way down to basically where we started the day. We end up rallying back here till about 1:30ish, and then complete just heavy volume again. So somebody's either still has a decent amount to sell, or we're just hitting a little bit of overhead supply where there's a lot of what they call dead bodies who are kind of stuck into this market. When we get back to a certain level and they say, hey, that's good enough, I'll bail out of this market. So, and here's another good point too, right around 3 o'clock, just when we're ready to take that leg higher. And you can kind of follow that through in a lot of just individual names. So it's a pretty big either sell program, or somebody's just doing this in futures and ETFs, because once you do that in futures and ETFs, you're affecting all the individual names that are in the S&P 500 or thereafter. Looking at the S&P 500, there's not really much to kind of say other than, hey, we had a nice day, we didn't fall apart at the end of the day. Again, I would say baby steps, and a little bit of progress made. We didn't fall apart like we did yesterday. We didn't sell off hard like we did Friday. So can we actually turn the corner here? That's going to be the next question for tomorrow. You could see we're almost generating an MACD crossover. So maybe one more day and you might actually see that. Let me go over and we'll just look at the other index charts, and then we'll move on to the sectors. IWM, I think, actually looks the better of the three indices. It's in value. It retook the 50-day moving average. Still has to get through this particular area, so that'll remain to be seen for tomorrow. Qs, like I said, Qs had a good range to them today. You could see we started here, finished here. Again, same thing, basically. Not over the 20-day moving average and not nearly over the 50-day moving average. So still a lot of work to be done there for us to kind of reclaim, more of the uptrend, I would say. Okay, so what was the story of the day? Commodities, oil. Oil up and closed basically very close to the highs of the day. Interesting, I talked about this a couple of times today in the trading room. We basically got to where we were here, just a big monster day, and finally, and I guess I don't know if I want to do this with two different charts, but I don't think it's going to line up perfectly. But we're kind of wondering. Let's see if Bloomberg will bring this up while I'm speaking. But we're kind of remembering back here when oil was rallying, energy companies weren't really moving with it. So let's see if that was back on when. That was back on 326. So if I zoom in here, and if we look at 326, which is probably here, notice that the energy stocks just really, this is XOP, the energy and gas ETF. So it doesn't line up perfectly, but I think right here, notice that we've just basically got to the same place we were in oil back at the end of March, and this time the energy stocks kind of went with it. So we can start with kind of the best. I always look at three ETFs in the space. I look at OIH, which is oil services. That was the best performer. At one point, this was up about 6%, finished a little bit off the highs, but big move there. A little bit more healthy in XOP, in terms of turning the corner. And OIH, not OIH, XLE, so I'll go through some of the individual names. Certainly there was some activity in this space. We did see it, besides, I never really like to follow that much of the momentum. Once everything starts to move, we get the same pattern over and over where there's just call buying in like 15 different names in energy. I don't know if there was that many, but it kind of felt like that. And a lot of the small cap names. So if you go into today's option activity, you could see EOG, XOM. They came in a couple times in Exxon. I think I've got a couple trades here at the end of the day. So several times in Exxon. Williams saw call buying. A couple of the MLP names, ETE and ETP, both saw call buying. Then if you get into the small, XOP saw call buying. WPX, another energy company. SUHP, I think PE also saw call buying. So this is what happens once the energy group gets some momentum to it. I tell you what, I didn't really chase. I've got a couple energy trades on. Nice trade by Tribeca Trade Group subscriber yesterday put on Oxy. I liked that chart yesterday a lot. So Oxy made a nice move and made move over that VPOC yesterday. Conoco has been a name that we've seen repeat call buying in. Just took out the highs there today. So these are names, again, I like to look for the activity before it really starts to get going. It's great when you're already in the trades and all these call buyers show up into the energy space. But I very rarely, APC was another name, by the way, that saw some call buying as well. But I don't like to chase these names once like all the moment. I view most of today's call buying as momentum players, right? They're not, I wouldn't say that they are the smart money. They're just kind of looking looking and on their screens, in my opinion, and just saying, hey, energy's starting to finally move. I'm going to tag onto it. I don't view that as some of the smarter trades in option activity. I view that as just guys who are catching on to that something is actually now moving. So some of the trades that we saw previously, those were great trades. I did not add any energy exposure to today, although I do think that this is possibly developing for, like this XLE chart looks fabulous to me, or Exxon. I think looks pretty good because, again, these names just haven't done anything. So I think they're worthy of a shot. And what's funny about this market is you will seem to get another chance to get in some of these names. It seems like with the way the market has been going, maybe you get an inside day tomorrow in either XOP or Exxon or whichever name that you've got your eye on. Exxon is still way below the 200-day moving average. I actually like the XLE a little bit better, even though you got pretty much a flatlined 200-day moving average here. It's going to take some time, I think, but clearly you got this VPOC all the way up here for 76 that you might be able to shoot for. And again, look at where XLE was in the beginning of January, or the end of January, and then kind of foot that to where oil was at the end of January, and there's not much difference. Here's where oil was. So it does seem like this is like, a decent group to kind of play for a return back. It just looks like the overall energy group has kind of tracked more of overall equities than it has oil. So, we certainly could have talked about that for a while, that energy stocks haven't really performed. I did find this notable as well. So oil wasn't the only thing that was moving today. Look at what copper did today. a lot of commodities were strong. They've kind of been beaten up. And there's two ETFs that you could look at here. DBC, which almost broke out to a 52-week high. Today, this is, not all commodities, but it's got a big group of commodities. It's got both Brent and WTI crude. It's got nat gas in it. It's actually got gold in it. And it's got a couple of the agriculture commodities in there as well. Then there's another one, the base metals ETF. This actually interests me here, this DBB, because it did get over the 50-day moving average as well as the top of value. DBB is a little bit different. That's the base metals ETF. So you've got copper, aluminum, and what's the other one? Zinc is in here as well. So that's also ticking up here. We also did see, I know all the attention seems to be on the energy companies, but there was also a decent amount of call buying in XME as well. That's the metals and mining ETF. We have seen some call. Steel was also very strong today. Names that we've seen call buying that I mentioned in previous videos is TS, which was up very nicely today, 3.5%. And then the other name that we saw was MT, also much higher than when we saw the call buying last week. So some of these names, you could have basically, if you put those trades on, you could be taking them off at this point or leaving on a runner because it's moved up decently from last week when we saw that option activity. The other group that was super strong was biotechs, which nothing really related. So again, good participation in some of the looking under the hood and looking under the sectors, even though that S&P index really again did move up, which is good, but there was a lot more exciting things going on than just what the S&P did today. Sage, which we saw a little bit of calls that went up midday, that thing popped. Just a couple other names I was looking at, and I put this out earlier. I very much like this chart of Sarepta. I think this is one of my favorite charts in the group. Oops, if I could get this to work here in Thinkorswim, as it's just downloading information. But I think a really nice, little bit of a channel or a wedge from the 52-week high. The overall group was a little bit weak. The overall market was weak, but this thing has come up really nicely here. And I did put on last week, as I talked about in I think a video maybe Wednesday of last week, I put on an XBI long on the 200-day moving average. Kind of got a little bit wishy-washy. I think I put it on here, and we had two big red days. And then it popped from here. So I'm now decently in the money on that trade where I sold the put spread, bought calls, and looking good, knock on wood, in this particular trade. But again, look at XBI up almost 4%. That's a pretty good sign for the overall market too, when you've got areas like biotech that are rallying. And then even tech, like even the semis were strong today. And I know it felt like today wasn't really about tech. I know Facebook did catch a nice bid when the Zuck was speaking, but semis were fine today. Micron had a little bit of strength today. Micron actually saw some repeat calls that went up today. A few other names in this group I think were strong. Nvidia was pretty strong after that upgrade or nice note out from Morgan Stanley. So there was some strength here. And then again, if you kind of go to those second tier tech names or software names, some really nice strength. Look at NTNX, very strong. Turning the corner. Everything about this group looks very strong. Look at Splunk, back into value as well, turning the corner. So I think that sets up pretty nice. Red Hat saw some call buying today. So you today felt like there was something for everybody today, depending on obviously if you're flexible and can trade any name, then it was then it's you're in a good place. If you're kind of stuck to trading some different groups, that today that was probably okay as well. The Chinese internet group was okay today. There was a couple names that I was watching that didn't work. I was watching BZUN that actually failed for the day. But overall, the group was strong. I think Baba finished up 4% on the day. That's now, I even sent this out this morning. Can Baba get back above the 200-day moving average? Certainly did that. So kind of resets the clock on Baba here. And that's a name that we've seen call buying the last couple days. What else do we see? The one group or one area that was very weak, and I don't know if it's just oil, but it seemed like it was something else. A lot of the airlines were extremely weak. Look at what happened to American Airlines today. If they put out some numbers that I thought were pretty good. Maybe I have to dig into that a little bit more. But we saw a lot of calls go up. They look to be outright calls, but maybe they were hedging a short position. I'm not sure. But this name really got beaten up, and so did the cruise lines. We actually saw some dip buying. So, very unusual, not only in the cruise line. So maybe you're thinking, okay, maybe because oil is so strong, these names sold off. But a couple of the hotel names did too. This has been a group that's been very strong in 2017, and they all look like they're breaking down a bit. So not really sure what's going on there, but a lot of the travel and leisure names very, very weak. And so there was a nice, very strong dip buyer. I did take this trade today. I don't like this price action, so I just took it for a day trade and got out of it. Right on the low of the day. There was some CCL calls right on this first when this first bar started. That's not the symbol I want. So it looked like a worthy shot to me. There was 3,000 of the May 62 and a half calls. That was a $600,000 trade. I got out of it mostly in here. I think my last piece off right in here. So again, this could end up up tomorrow, but I figure there's no need to put on a ton of trades. What else? Also, I think the banks were pretty good today. A lot of groups up around 2% today or close to it. Was there anything else that I wanted to cover? I talked about steel, telecom. There was a little bit of activity there with T-Mobile and Sprint, talking about that merger going through. End of day, what did we see? MGM, maybe one last name to kind of talk about. Again, kind of goes with the travel and leisure group. MGM really hasn't done much. This has been a tough name on option activity. I did not take the trade. Maybe I'll kind of keep an eye on it. But they came in a couple times to MGM. Maybe something to keep an eye on. Last name that I'll talk about, there's calls here. These were swept. There was also a bigger block that went up in MGM. Last thing that I think is also looking constructive that we talked about in the room was Square. Square is another name that has that pattern. Decent wave up. Retracement, wave up, smaller retracement, big wave up, retracement. Could look like it wants to make that next turn. You could look at the 50-day moving average, also a move inside value, which would get you above the 20 as well. There in Square. So I think also a pretty good name to look at. So a lot of names, after a big day like this, you could kind of sort through the different pieces and kind of take a look and see some names that are now turning the corner and looking pretty good technically. So again, nice move today, and setting up hopefully for some follow through for the rest of the week. Thanks for watching and have a great day.